I was perusing the Facebook Marketplace, like I always do, looking for heavily discounted musical instruments or just equipment in general, and I happened upon what I thought was a guitar shaped clock. Like an MDF panel with an image of a guitar that had a clock put on it or in it. But no, upon further inspection, I realized that this was an actual guitar somebody put a hole in so they could put a clock in it. And at the time, I didn't know what would possess a person to do something like that, but it happened, and I thought for $40, it might be worth picking it up and trying to turn it back into a guitar. So, this is the story of a guitar that became a clock and then is going to become a guitar again. Full circle. This is the guitar in question. It is a clock and a guitar. And there was a hole drilled in the front to put the clock in, obviously. But not just the front. It goes into the back too, which is kind of a wild way to do things. I understand the need to be able to replace the battery. And no hate to the person who did this. I'm not sure if they knew whether or not a neck break like this could be fixed. It can, definitely. It's actually a lot better than a headstock breaking off. It's just split. The fretboard started to separate from the body. It's pretty cracked. It opens a lot, but I fixed worse than this, which is strange to say now, but I can definitely fix that. But fixing this is going to be extra tricky. There's no braces on the inside because the top is about 3 to 4 millimeters, which is quite thick. At least I think it's thick, but I've never worked with a hollow body before, so I don't know how thick they usually are. There's no braces, there's no blocks in there other than at the tail and where the neck attaches, but I can't actually get my hand in all the way. There's a clock in the way. It's had some skulls attached to the front and a Harley Davidson pin of some kind. It's like a nailed on thing. But it did come with its control plate cover. It's got its potentiometers and its output jack. The switches are gone, as are the pickups. I can easily make my own pickups or buy some pickups on Amazon just to get this thing playing electrically as well as acoustically. But, man, it's going to be quite a job filling in this hole here and here. But it's going to be easier because the top is thick. It means I can, inlay a piece. Given that this is from the 60s and also a cheaper instrument, I'm going to say quite possibly spruce, because that's a pretty standard material for an acoustic instrument. But overall, the goal here is for me to take this thing completely apart, pull the clock out, take the control plate off, basically remove everything and bring it down to bare bones so I can get a much better, closer look at the damage, I guess, that I have to fix. I mean, this was done intentionally, and it actually does look pretty cool. And there was the consideration to keep the clock here and then just turn it into a guitar. But I don't think I'd be able to put a saddle here and get proper action because the clock is the same height as the frets. So a little too close. But so I'm going to grab a screwdriver. We're going to start taking this thing apart and taking a closer look at it, and maybe I can get some photos of the wood and see if I have anything that matches. Because if you look in the hole here, and I don't know if you can actually see it, but there is like a dark line that runs across the whole thing, which could be burning from the circle cutter, but it could also be ply, because some of the chips that I can see on the inside look like they're different on the inside. I don't know. So I'm just going to grab myself a bit. I have an actual screwdriver somewhere. I just don't know where it is at the moment. I'm going to put the clock into something else. It is a cute looking little clock. I gotta say, this is probably one of the smallest neck plates I've ever seen in my life. It's very tiny. There's a few other pieces that are missing. There's a retaining rod for the strings that goes right up against the headstock there. You can see the 2 holes near the volute. Or make my own. I could plug those holes and put a more slightly modern one in. I'd like to restore this back to the way it would have been. But finding the original pickups for this would probably be expensive. There's a little, oh, look at that, made in Japan. I didn't even notice that. There's a little sticker. I thought it was going to be a serial number. But a little made in Japan sticker, which is sweet. I absolutely love Japanese made instruments. Ibanez are my baby. If I ever got endorsed by a guitar brand for my music and whatever, please be Ibanez. I might actually turn any other brand down. But if you want to send me a free guitar to write a song with and do like a music video or something, hey, hit me up. So the neck is off these. Oh. Oh, gosh. Oh, it's just taped on. I thought I was murdering. I thought I was murdering the paint or the wood. Ooh. It seems that these were always intended to be stuck onto things. They're pretty cool. I think they're made out of metal. I might use them for something else. But now I got this, probably not 3M. Oh, the foam's not ripping too much. I'm assuming those holes were supposed to be there because the paint job and the lacquer is actually inside the hole, so that wasn't drilled there. I need something that isn't sharp, but can get under there. Ooh, guitar picks. I don't really play. Oh, I don't want to use this one. That was a birthday guitar pick. I don't want to destroy it. Use these Music Lily ones. But now I got these two little skulls, and for now I will just stick them together. Regardless, now this Harley Davidson thing is going to be easier, more difficult. This one was definitely punched through the top. Okay, the hole left is actually very, very tiny. And now for the clock. This can be removed after. Honestly, I don't even really need to remove this to repair anything. I will, because I might need access through there and here. I mean, I'm probably going to repair the top first, because I think it's the most important piece to deal with. And then I'll do the back. But potentially I'll do them both at the same time. I'm not worried about breaking the clock. If the clock breaks, then it breaks. Oh, it's the glass cracking. Yeah, okay, I've broken all the glue joints around the outside, but now for safety concern, that glass needs to fall out into something. I think that was all the glass. Make sure it goes to the bottom of the can. Ow, it's pinching me. So now I'm just taping a piece of cardstock from an old notebook to the top so I can trace out the hole and then go outside and see if I have any material that would be the right size and thickness to plug this. Maybe. Maybe. Actually, I'm not trying to match the grain up, just kind of have a very similar look to it. And I think this piece of poplar might be it. I decided to use the poplar because it's pretty close to the thickness of the top and back. However, I failed to cut out the plug twice, so now I only have enough to do a patch for the top. I'm going to have to figure out what I'm doing about the back at a later date. That's a problem for future me to deal with. Okay, so this guy ran out of recording space because I forgot to take the 4 hours of drumming off of it. So you're going to have to deal with camera audio. But I went ahead and cut out the first plug for the top. I'd like to do the top first, as I've probably already mentioned, because it's the most important part. The back, I'm going to patch it, but I'm not sure it's entirely required. And this one's going to be a lot easier because the back is actually pretty flat. The top is definitely not flat. But regardless, This is made from poplar. It's about a 1/4 inch thick, so it's a little thicker than it actually needs to be, which is good. It means I can plane in and chisel in the curvature of the top into this. And I want to make sure it's pretty flush with the inside, or at least the center of the inside. But overall, it's a pretty good fit. It's not perfect. There are slight gaps, but this hole was not perfect. It's got chip out in places from drilling the initial hole. There's also parts where there was glue and I had to slightly chisel away the glue, and therefore a little bit more wood than I would have liked, but only by like a fraction of a millimeter, so there's going to be slight gaps. But for the most part, I'm not seeing that much light. There's a little bit of light right here, but this is where I had to remove quite a bit of a big glob of glue that leaked into the sides of the between the clock and the actual body. So it's fine. I'll have to do a little fill work, but I was never expecting this to look like it was never drilled into and never had a hole cut in it. If it plays and it sounds fine, that's all I care about. I want a hollow body guitar. It's cool. Never actually had one to play before, and eventually I'll get myself a nicer one, but this is a cool vintage instrument. So all I really have to do now is actually like glue this in place, and then I will do the gap filling once this thing is carved to the rough shape that it needs to be to match the curvature of the top, or at least get fairly close. Anyways, onto the gluing and shaping and stuff. When smart people get sick, they rest. I'm stupid. And with the plug glued in and roughly shaped, it was time to start thinking about a bridge. So I had to check the scale length, estimate where a bridge would land, check what the potential string span would be, and figure out if there is a bridge out there that I could buy relatively cheap that would have the proper string spacing. And for a large portion of this, I thought it was going to be something super proprietary and I was going to be forced to make a bridge. And as much as I want to make one, being forced to do that just kind of adds a level of stress because it means it's literally the only option. So if I can't do it or screw it up too much, then it's never getting done, which would suck. You will have to excuse the slight mess and my voice. I'm coming down with a cold or the flu. My energy isn't great and I just haven't gotten around to cleaning this yet. But I had a curiosity because I keep every instrument part that I stumble upon that isn't like in an instrument. Sometimes I'll buy cheap instruments just to strip components off so I can experiment with. So I have parts to, in an emergency, replace a tuning machine if it breaks. So I have like a lot of random stuff. And I was wondering if I had any nuts that would fit in a neck this narrow, or at least be oversized in comparison enough to file them down and shape them into a nut blank that I can then make a nut for this. And I didn't, but I did have a couple nuts that I actually forgot that I bought for another instrument that didn't end up needing them. And so I just grabbed it curiously and I held it against the neck or against the fretboard where the nut would go, and it's a perfect fit. And I measured it after remembering to zero out my calipers, and it measured 42 millimeters, and I was like, hold on a second, there's a good chance that maybe a standard bridge would work here. Not guaranteed, because neck taper is different on a lot of guitars, so it could be extra wide down here or very straight, so it could be not standard. But I have another 1960s guitar that I took a bridge off of because I switched it out for a tunematic style bridge from an old Epiphone guitar, so I have a little bit of intonation options. And that bridge, the bridge that came from that one is this one. And it doesn't intonate or anything, but it's a fairly standard string spacing, I think, or very close to it, because that guitar seemingly was based off Fender, and this neck, given the headstock shape, is very obviously a Fender copy. It says Saturn on it, but it's definitely a Fender copy. But, so I decided to grab this bridge and set it down where I estimated the bridge would land based on the scale length, or just like somewhere in the ballpark, which was like around here. And it held the strings in the slots because this is just yarn. It's not actually going to stay in the slots on its own. And then I visually centered the bridge with the neck, and that string spacing is actually pretty good. So I made a bridge. I wasn't sure how it was going to turn out. It's not done. I haven't radiused the bottom of it so that it fits to the top, now that the top is like actually pretty carved. It's not perfectly sanded or anything, so I'm probably going to wait for that before I do this, because the finish sanding and the applying of finish, stain, and potentially other things to try and cover up the seams to make it look a little nicer may change the shape of the top a little bit. But overall, this is made out of flamed maple. It doesn't look very flamed at the moment, and I don't know if it's really going to come through when it's done, but it's very scratched up. But hopefully this will be good enough. It's about 8 to 9 millimeters thick here and 5 millimeters thick here. Seems good enough. It's not super large. It's not the size of a regular acoustic bridge, which I could have done, but I wanted something a little bit more subtle. There's only about 14 millimeters in height that I can have for a bridge and a saddle in combination, so I can't really do the height adjustment thing. It's considerations. If I make a height adjustable bridge, it's going to be a lot of extra work, but I could also just do a standard bridge for now, and I could, once I know that the neck can handle string tension and that the body's not going to collapse and that everything went well, I can consider upgrading it to a height adjustable bridge in the future with a neck angle. I decided to sand the radius into the bottom of the bridge now, because while the body will change shape slightly, there's a lot of material to remove, and doing it now will make dialing it in the final steps a lot quicker. So, sanding from a different angle. With the body as far as it is, I figured it was a good idea to start working on the neck, because it's going to need a few days to dry before it's ready to have any sort of tension put on it. So I pulled out a flashlight to gauge how far these splits were running, so I knew exactly where glue needed to go. And once I had that figured out, I used a little bit of compressed air to push some slightly watered down Type Bond Original into the neck as far as I could get it to go. And then I clamped it up and left it for like 3 days. During that time, I decided to start working on a saddle, which would eventually be put into the bridge. And this was a new experience for me, because I've never made my own saddle or nut, and I've never worked with bone before. But it's a little strange because it's bone. This used to be a living, breathing creature that, from what I understand, died long before I was born. Its bones were ethically collected from my friend's property, processed a little bit, cleaned, and then just kind of stored in a bag for years before they ended up in my possession. And so they've been sitting in a bag for the last 2-3 years, and I've been putting off actually making any saddles or nuts out of it, because this is the first time I've ever processed the bone of a creature. And so it's always felt, I don't want to say wrong, because they weren't like unethically retrieved, but this is the body of a creature not like me, but also like me. And I'm sure most luthiers are probably used to this sort of thing by now, but this is a whole new ball game for me working with bone. And so I'm trying to be the least wasteful that I can be, and the most respectful towards these pieces of a creature. And I don't really know how else to explain it. But the point is, I'm trying to do as good of a job as I can the first time around so I don't have to have any wasted bone, so that this animal's piece could be a part of an instrument that creates music for years to come until the day that I also become a lump of bones. I got the 3 lowest strings tuned up mostly to E standard. I haven't heard any weird sounds other than like strings and the trapeze settling and stuff. And it's holding up. I had to put some notches into my saddle just so the strings stayed in place. I figured out the string spacing and everything. 10 millimeters in between. So actually, fairly standard, which makes me really excited for future upgrade prospects. It means that I could actually get standard parts for this. But doesn't sound great right now because, I mean, the action is very, very high. But it's half up to tension. These aren't fully loose, but I'm feeling a lot better about it holding up. I didn't hear any weird shifting of the top. No weird shifting of the neck, and I was holding on to the neck the whole time while I tuned so I could feel for any like physical shifts or whatever, and it seems fine. I do need to make a string retainer because the high E doesn't want to stay in place, which is not surprising. But overall, it's playing notes now. Which is awesome. And with that, I'm going to call it here for now because this is a very big project with many phases, and to try and fit it all into one video would make it very, very long, or I'd have to cut a whole bunch of the process out to keep it short, and neither of those options sound very good to me. So I'm going to be doing it in parts, and I'm going to try and keep these parts relatively organized, but because I'm working on this a little bit sporadically, so I'm not working on the same thing for too long and burning myself out, there will be sprinkles of different phases in each video. But again, I'm going to try and keep it as organized as I can. But without further ado, I've been Naira, you've been incredible, thank you for hanging out with me today. And if you want to listen to my music, there's links in the description. And if you want to follow this project, subscribe to this channel, because honestly the uploads will probably be pretty sporadic too. Anyways, thanks again, and I'll see you guys in the next one. I should probably take the string tension off now.